tonight?
Great!
Wonderful, wonderful. It is a great privilege to be here tonight to honor the first awardee of the Spirit of Millie Jeffrey Awards. I would be remiss to mention that as a student at Wayne State, increasingly further away, that I remember first meeting Millie on campus. And I mean, all the talk about her focus, her work, small in stature, but always driven in purpose. And strapped with often a backpack on her back, quickly running in a direction to do something, to speak to something, to fight for justice every step of the way. It was an inspiration to me. It was involved in student government, and really it's been a role model. As a father now of two little girls who are named in the namesakes of Alice Paul and Sojourner Truth and Eleanor Roosevelt, I'm remiss to be up here to not only honor her, but also look at her achievement and her work. And as we recognize Bruce Fealk today, someone who embodies this in terms of community activism, community passion, of an ongoing fight for social and economic justice. There's no one who's more deserving. Before I ask Bruce to come up here, and I promise to be brief, is that I'm reminded, and I train other people to get involved in civic action, the rules of engagement for nonviolent activism of Gandhi, that the principles of first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win, come to mind in the type of work that from where I first met Bruce in the 2004, around that era through now, and the work that he's continued to do to fight, to bring attention, to be driven by a sense of purpose, is embodied in all of his work. And I think it's important to remember that for all of us who've been involved in this type of work for a long time, that it's easy sometimes to maybe feel discouraged and look back and say, well, is this actually making a difference? How do you continue to be motivated to continue to fight for progress when you feel you hit some shortcomings, or that election doesn't go the way that we want, or the social action that we're fighting for it doesn't get achieved? You have to have something that is driving you. And that force that drives us, that brings us to dinners like this, that brings us to the work that we do, is the same type of thing that drives Bruce. And I've seen it firsthand, shoulder to shoulder, in efforts. In your program is the bio of so many of the accomplishments that he's done. But I also want to take this moment to recognize the sacrifice that people around you have to sometimes endure to make this happen. That it can be tough. And when the forces that we are fighting up against, the change that we're trying to make happen, the people who hold the power aren't going to release it willingly. And sometimes we have to bring it center stage. Sometimes it's an all-in-your-face approach that we have to be able to do that. And someone like Bruce has done that. And to his family that's here tonight, I want to thank you for sharing Bruce with us. That his work, his efforts, his accomplishments are noticed and recognized today by everyone here. But there are few people that I know that their name is a verb in some circles. Have you been Bruce Fealk? Because of an unrelentless commitment to social justice, and not only at the most local level, but the state and national level. Bruce, thank you very much. This award is so deserving to you. Come up here and receive your award.
First, I want to say thank you to the Justice Caucus for the recognition of my activism. It was a complete surprise when Paul called me. I was with my grandchildren at the public pool in Madison, and my phone was buried in my bag with the towels and the other stuff you have to take when you take your grandchildren out. So I didn't get to call him back. I didn't get to answer the phone right away. But I never expected at this point to receive any recognition for my activism. Some of the things I've done as an activist have been a little out of the box, you might say. I want to take a few minutes to tell you some of the things you may not know about me. When I was working as a core reporter, I owned my own freelance core reporting firm, and during my career I took some sales training to try to grow my firm. And as a part of that training I took a personality test. Don't laugh yet. When the owner of the sales training company gave me the results of my personality test, he looked at the score for perseverance, and he said he'd never seen a score like that ever in all of his time of doing sales training. And those of you that know me probably aren't surprised by that revelation. My perseverance has served me well, though. Not everyone has always appreciated the work that I've done in this area, especially some of my family. I thought I'd take a few minutes to tell you some of the stories that kind of happened behind the scenes, and I think some of them are amusing. I hope you'll enjoy them. One of the favorite things that happened was somewhere in the timeline of my activities against Joe Nolenberg. I was minding my own business at home, my phone rings, and it's my brother. We don't talk often, but it was my brother. He didn't even say hello or any pleasantries that I can remember. The first words out of his mouth are, "You have to change your name." At first I thought he was kidding, but after he repeated it a couple of times, and by the tone of his voice I could tell he was dead serious. He has a lawn service business, and apparently some of his customers didn't agree with some of the things that I've been doing, and were telling him they were going to cancel their lawn service with him if he didn't, because he and I were brothers. Of course, I told him I wasn't changing my name, which he seemed displeased about. I did tell him he was welcome to change his name. Some of you may remember a gentleman by the name of Chet Zarko. Chet was a local Republican who happened to be attending a Republican fundraiser the day I rolled out the giant head of Joe Nolenberg. Chet passed away a couple of years ago, and Chet had a blog, and somewhere in the time when waterboarding was a topic of discussion, I challenged Chet to volunteer to be waterboarded. Chet took the position that waterboarding wasn't torture, and I took the opposite position. Chet had a couple of conditions, though. One was that I had to find a qualified waterboarder. One might wonder, where can you find a qualified waterboarder? So I did what anyone looking for a qualified waterboarder would do. I put an ad up on Craigslist. Almost as a joke, but to even my surprise, I started getting responses to my ad. Altogether, I probably got 50 responses to my ad. One guy even said he'd been in Guantanamo, and he had waterboarded prisoners there. I figured he was qualified. When I told Chet I had some qualified waterboarders, then he wanted to have medical personnel standing by. So I got to do that. In fact, I think Jim Crewer volunteered to be the medical personnel. Then he wanted me to have an insurance policy in case something went wrong. What could go wrong? At this point, I began to think he wasn't serious, and he was more afraid than even he'd admit. I was kind of glad we never did it. Some of you may remember the town hall we had in Pontiac in 2007 about the Iraq War. I had a whole routine planned with Joe's head. I found a friend of mine to wear the head, but they didn't want me to do it. But I got myself on stage anyway. But the guy that was wearing the head didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. He went out on stage wearing the giant head of Joe Nolenberg. After he left the stage, he couldn't figure out how to get the giant head off. And he was really panicking. He still recounts that story to me every time I see him, and I think he still has nightmares about never being able to get the head off. The thing that frustrates me the most is talking to people that are what are referred to as independent voters. They'll often say, both parties are at fault. The Democrats are as bad as the Republicans, but it's not true. And Mr. Mann is going to talk about that. Both parties have their faults, but they are not equal, in my opinion. One party as a whole clearly has the best interest of the country at heart, and the other party has the interests of their party, only their party at heart. This comes at a critical time in our history when we have huge problems to solve, and we're becoming unable to solve them due to the lack of the ability for our government to act in a responsible way. As an activist, I hope the next time any of you get a call to action to drive to Lansing for a protest or to take some kind of action, instead of clicking the next email in your inbox, you'll say to yourself, yes, I'll be there. I will stand up for democracy. I will say no to indifference. I will say no to the extremists that want to destroy our government. I will say no to letting poor people starve. I'll say no to letting my neighbor be sick or die because he or she can't afford to go to a doctor. I saw a quote the other day on Facebook, and if any of you are my Facebook friends, you probably saw it. I'd rather be a bleeding heart liberal than have no heart at all. I truly appreciate your recognition of my efforts. Thank you very much.